Okay, let us just wait because people have to join both over the web as well as, yeah. It rarely happens, right? I'm on time. So, uh, okay. T2 large, you will be charged for the instances. Ping me if you are not charged, because the only free machine is T2 micro, right? For me, I create machines left and right because Ramana pays the bill, right? It's not me. T2 micro is the only free machine in Amazon. Yeah, I think you should get, man. Irrespective of whether you attend or don't attend, I think you should get the mail. That's how actually, if you see, 200 people have to attend the class based out of the numbers which we have on our list. Only 70 turn up. Rest of the people just rely on videos. So I think it should be okay, at least for 2 or 3 days. Yeah, yeah. Okay then. C drive లో వీడియోలను తీసాను. Okay. So we have learned about JSON, right? Today let us try to learn about YAML file, right? Both are, the purpose is same. Like JSON, YAML is also used to represent data, represent data, but they have different structure. That's it. They have different structure, right? So JSON is collection of what? Key value pairs. YAML is also the same thing. YAML is also the same thing, right? And whenever we speak about any values, key value pairs, key could be anything and value could be anything. The same thing over here, right? So now let me write about a student info, student.yaml. YAML can be written as YAML or YML, both are same. All right. Initially, when it started, people were calling it as, or the idea was at another markup language. That was what it was all about. But now people have changed its terminology and now they are calling it as it ain't a markup language. ఇది మార్కప్ లాంగ్వేజ్ కాదంటున్నారు. మొదలెట్టినప్పుడు ఇది ఇంకో మార్కప్ లాంగ్వేజ్ అనేవాడు. That's a funny conventions how these things turn out to be, right? So we would have key and value pairs. So key colon value. Okay, what is the name? I'll write test. Name of the student is test. Another property, all right? Mobile number. You can or cannot use quotes. You can or cannot use quotes. It's your choice, right? For the string, it is your choice whether you want to use quotes or not, right? Even if you don't use quotes, YAML is intelligent enough to say that it is a string, right? So for whatever type it will identify, it will be that type. For example, I write something like, the answer of this is true or false, but here you can also write yes or no. Even yes or no is true or false, all right? So looking very much simple. Every key value pair you have to write on a new line. right? Fine. And now courses he is attending. You can write the square bracket notation, but the traditional way of YAML is go to the next line, give some spaces. Throughout the file, try to give the same set of spaces to tell it is child. To tell it is child. So courses. So this courses has three values, which is DevOps, AWS, right? Fine. Simple structure. Yeah. You would have key and a value, key colon value, everything in a new line, right? Whenever you want to tell multiple values, you would be using hyphen. Hyphen is a list item. All right. Now I want to tell about address. Address, I have basically whenever I want to tell about address, can I tell address in one line? Yeah, absolutely yes. But this time I don't want to tell it. I want to tell address as multiple key value pairs. So whenever I can't tell something in one word, we call it as a complex object, right? Or a primitive type is whenever you can tell it in one stuff, and whenever you can't tell it in, then we call it as a complex stuff. Now I'm trying to design it a complex stuff. So the stuff which I want to write is child or about address, right? So whenever you want to tell about anything about address, on the top line, how many spaces you have given? Throughout the file, you have to maintain that spacing. So again, I'll give two spaces, and then I would say, okay, sorry, apartment or sorry, building. This is the key, okay, and the value is something like this, okay, and then street hyphen one. This is a key, okay, and then let me write some values or let me type some ad hoc stuff. Okay, fine. Now street hyphen two. Again some stuff. City. Okay. Are you getting the context? So whenever you want to tell anything about the key which you have mentioned, you will be going two spaces after that. So for example, for city, if I want to give some additional information, after city, I'll be giving two spaces. After city, I'll be giving two spaces. In the JSON, we have curly braces notation. Okay, everything is separated by curly braces. But here, if you see, you will give spacing. And for the people who have learned Python, I don't think so it is very difficult to relate, because in Python, whenever you write anything, you will give basically telling that by spacing convention. In YAML, we do the same thing, right? Now, let me write one more file so that we will be closer to it. Institute.yaml. Let me write institutes.yaml. Okay, I'm going to write about two institutes, right? So let me call the first one as software is a key. Okay, all the software institutes I want to tell, but will there be only one software institute? No, multiple. So child of it, again two spaces, since I have to tell about multiple hyphen. And now can I tell one institute's value in a string like courses, AWS or DevOps? I can't. So I have to write multiple information about it. So name of the institute. Okay, quality thought, right? Courses offered. And in quality thought courses, is it one course or multiple courses? So it is child of courses, right? So two spaces again hyphen. Are you getting the context? Okay, something like this. Okay, and now I want to tell one more attribute of the quality thought, which is branches. Are branches singular or multiple? Multiple. So two spaces again and a hyphen. right? And whenever you are giving hyphens, hyphen can start with the same line, even that is fine. But have a habit of giving two spaces so that everything is same. All right? Branches. One is, I'm writing directly. Nilgiri. 208. 603. And then Satyam Theater. So I don't want to write the number. I don't know the number. So these are the three steps. Right? This is about one institute. Now I want to tell about one more institute. So I have said institutes, not software institutes. So this time my category, if I want to tell about one more software institutes, I will be just giving hyphen and then saying name. All right? And I might write a name such as NIIT. Okay? And subsequent information of what NIIT has to offer. Right? So my software institutes are done. Now I want to go with something else. Okay? So what is the other institute which we have? Okay, let us promote yoga as Narendra Modi is doing that. This is the only thing which Narendra Modi is doing good, right? So let us also help him in promoting yoga, right? Fine. So, but I don't know what are the institutes, but yeah. Are you getting the whole context over here? So I have two key value pairs in this file level. One is software institutes, and software institutes are multiple in nature. So whenever it is multiple, I'll use hyphen, right? And hyphen could be a simple value or a complex value. Whenever it is complex, complex is nothing but collection of key value pairs. Is it making sense? Right? Much like JSON, there is no difference. Purpose exactly the same. You can use either YAML or JSON. In Kubernetes, whenever we speak with kubectl, yesterday we have seen something called as kubectl. For kubectl, we'll be giving YAML, and kubectl will convert that YAML into JSON, and it will speak with Kubernetes API. Kube API manager. Kube API manager doesn't know YAML, it knows JSON. So, and the library which you can speak with Kube API manager is written in Go and Python, right? But we are not developers to speak with programming languages. We use command line APIs. So, to the kubectl, we will write an YAML which looks like this, and then it will convert that into JSON, gets the job done by API manager or master as such. That's the whole idea. Fine, making sense, right? So, for whatever practice which you have done on the JSON, you can try same samples here, right? And if you have any doubts whether I have written a right one or a wrong one, what you can do is, there are hell lot of, if you know one format, writing the other is very simple, right? JSON to YAML converter. Okay, so this is a JSON file, and if you see, this is the particular YAML file over here. All right, so if you don't like this idea, you can write your own. JSON file starts with an object, ends with an object, right? And then we have a name, qt. Are you seeing this stuff? Okay, and then we use comma as a separator, but in the case of JSON, in the case of YAML, it is the next line. All right, so courses, AWS, Devops, Azure. Okay, the hyphens, as I said, can start from the same line. For your convention, you can basically start with the two spaces also. It's fine whether you started from two spaces or not. Are you seeing the difference? So if you know one format, creating the other one is not very difficult, right? అలాగే YAML వస్తే JSON కూడా create చేయొచ్చు. But if you see, the purpose is same. Here I want to tell about the name of the institute and the courses offered. This is how you write in JSON, and that is how you do it. Yeah. All right. And while learning Ansible, we will be working on YAML. So it is good that you know YAML also along with JSON, because when we go with Packer, when we go with many other tools, we will be writing JSON files, right? But when we go with Ansible, when we go with Kubernetes, we will be using YAML. Fine. So anything is the whole point is you want to represent the data, and you take one of the formats, right? So when we do this kind of a stuff, this will be converted to a JSON which API manager understands, and kubectl does that job. And kubectl does that job because in Kubernetes everything is an object. Everything is an object that is implemented in a language which is called as Go. The client which kubectl basically speaks with is a Golang client. So basically whenever you try to say kubectl apply -f and then you give pod.yaml file, that's what we have done yesterday, right? Then what happens, the YAML which you have written will be converted into JSON object, and that object has two important things. One is the input which we provide, which they call it as object spec, object specification, and the result of it would be object status. What is it? There are two important things in this API. One is object spec, the other one is object status. You said I want to create a pod with nginx. Wonderful. So that is your spec. And whenever we did kubectl get pods, what was the result? See, it was saying that the pod is running. That is the status, right? But whenever you are calling this from a programming language, you do all of that. But whenever, for whatever approach which we are using, we did not know all of that, right? But Kubernetes can be controlled from an external programming language also. As of now, they support basically Golang clients, and they support Python clients, and they are working on giving APIs to all the languages as such, right? So that's the whole idea about it. But this is what we write. Fine. Now let me go to the stuff which I have opened yesterday. Right, I said, right, we would start with today with understanding what is this YMLs which we would write. Is it making sense now? We have a key which is called as the API version, right? API version is a version of the API manager, schema version of your API manager which is supported. That is V1. That is always fixed as such. We generally don't change our values with that, right? And the next one, next key is kind, and the value of it is pod. And the next stuff is metadata. Metadata is about an object. Metadata is not one thing. So it is a complex object. So the complex object has a property called as name, and the value of it is hello pod, right? And then we have a key called as spec, and spec has one object which is called as containers, and containers are multiple in nature. So that's why they start with hyphen, right? And then there is a key called as name of the container, image of the container, and what is the ports which you want to use, right? So now let me do this. Okay. If I had to write the same stuff in JSON, it would have sounded something like this. Purpose absolutely the same, absolutely the same. All right. Okay. But remember, kubectl will not do this conversion. It will convert into object spec and object status. All right. So anything or everything, the concept is same as long as it is collection of key value pairs, right? In JSON, to represent an array, we use a square bracket. Here we use hyphen, right? In JSON, to tell a complex object, we start from curly braces. Here we will have distinct key value pairs, right? For example, in this case, this is an object, and this object has a key which is called as a name and a hello pod. It can have some other things, but as of now they don't have it, right? So this is how you write basically YAML files. YAML structure is clear, right? Okay. Now let me go ahead and basically bring up the servers which we had shut down yesterday, right? And see whether the nodes are still up and running. If not, let us make our efforts to bring that up. So okay. I think we have associated between node and node 1 and master, but it's okay. Let us see. We have given elastic IP addresses, right? So our interfaces don't change. But let us see whether the nodes are still in connected mode or not. Okay. So okay. kubectl get working. Okay. It doesn't change. All right. In the same way, let me connect to the other node, which is node 1. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Docker working. Yes. Okay then. So kubectl get. Okay, yesterday I have shut down the machines, and before I shut down, I had these things running, and even after restarted the complete cluster, the things are still up and running. All right. So let me remove this. I am not interested in this. Kubectl delete -f, and if I am not wrong, I have written something called as manifest slash, what was it? Yeah, both myport.yaml and then pod dot. Okay. So let me describe about the use case which we are trying to do in Kubernetes. All right. So our use case is this. Where is one note? Okay. Okay. Create a Kubernetes deployment for OpenMRS. Okay. And for the people who don't know about OpenMRS, you can Google it. But OpenMRS is a open source hospital management system, right? So OpenMRS is a Java-based application which requires Java 8 and Tomcat 8, and it has one database component. Okay, one database which is MySQL, which is MySQL, right? So basically, the first thing which you have to do is you have to create an image for this stuff, and MySQL can be in a container. MySQL can be in a container, but to simulate the real-time stuff, I'll be using a MySQL from Amazon RDS. Amazon RDS is a database where you can host MySQL services. This is what I would be using. Okay. So, and this OpenMRS is used by multiple people at one shot. So we need to support scale. We cannot work with one container. You have to work with multiple containers of it. And this OpenMRS has multiple versions of it. Multiple versions of it. So basically we need to support upgrading the versions, right? So the basic pipeline will look something like this. OpenMRS will have some code, right? And in that code, we will be building Docker file. And basically, once we have this Docker file, we'll be pushing the image to Docker hub. All right. And now from Kubernetes, I'll be creating a service and a deployment. Simple. From Kubernetes, I'll be creating a service and a deployment. Right. Now, this is Java based application. Let us assume it is a Node.js application. What will be your steps? OpenMRS was not a Java based application. It is a Node.js application. Will your steps differ? The only thing that will differ is Docker file. Rest of the things is that does Kubernetes is expecting some technology? No. Right? So in Docker file, if it is a Node.js stuff also, there are lot of Docker Hub images. Go and find out one Node.js application. If you want to find out one Python application, right? There are many images in Docker Hub which consists of Python applications. Just look at Docker file, because Docker file is a very simple language which everyone can understand. In Docker file, what is that we would have? We would have maintainer, you would have run steps, you would have CMD, you would have entry point, and you would have expose and some environment variables. Nothing more than that. Okay. And then you might have a lot of shell scripts that you need to understand. Right? Without shell scripts, we can't really think of this DevOps. Right? So this is my use case. Right? I will have at least 3 or 4 OpenMRS instances working, right? And then basically I have to create a service, I have to create a deployment, and before that I have to create a pod, right? But at this moment we don't know how to create a pod, how to create a service, and how to create a deployment. So let us put our focus on that. If I take some image, how do I create how do I basically create a pod with that? How do I create a service with that? How do I create a deployment with that? Make sense? Right? The only change which I will be doing in the tomorrow's class is I'll start with building this image. Right? So I have given the requirements. There it requires Java 8 and Tomcat 8, since this is an OpenMRS image. If your company is developing something else, it might have its own requirements. Node.js application, it uses Node.js 7.1 or something like that, right? And it might use a MongoDB. So you would have images for both the cases. Okay. Even MySQL, I can use a container, but MySQL container is very good for dev purposes. In production, people tend to use the actual database. In production, people tend to use the actual database. So that's why I'm going with a model where my middleware or my OpenMRS application server is on Kubernetes and my database is on somewhere else. So this is my way of looking at this, right? Even if you don't set up that MySQL, you can still see the home page. That is more than enough for us for simulating this scenario. That's why I take that application. If I take other applications, right, if the database is not working, the application will not pop up and you will see unnecessary errors. In OpenMRS, even if the database is not set up, you will see at least the home page saying that set up the database. We will not set it up. That's it. That's the whole idea about it. Are we clear? Right? So this is the use case which I wanted to. And there is one more for the people who want to try a bit complicated scenario or in different technology. There is one more thing which is called as Telform. Telform is an alternative to Google Forums, which is implemented in Node.js. You can Google for this, you will find out the steps and you can try that one also. All right, these are the two alternatives which you can think of. End-to-end deployment. How many of you have started from Kubernetes from Docker? Can you raise your hands? Okay, you just try this, more than enough. For the people who have been here from Jenkins, I would expect you to create a Jenkins job which builds the OpenMRS. You will have a war file. You are building a Docker war file from Jenkins, pushing that to the Docker Hub repository, and then as part of your downstream job or one more build step from Kubernetes, you are applying this. That's the whole stuff which I want you to do. Right? So this is the basic stuff. For this is the complete pipeline. If you are simulating from the complete CI and CD setup, okay, start from Git, build the code, take the war file, use that war file in your Docker image building. Okay, and then comes the rest of the stuff. Rest of the stuff is known to all of you, all of the people over here building the Docker file, right? And all of that. For the people who are doing it for now, you are using your own command line tool, but very soon you will be moving it to continuous integration. You will be using Jenkins invoke shell or invoke batch file, and then you will be doing the same stuff there. I don't expect any plugins there. Okay, if you are using plugins, wonderful, but plugins are not required for the people who are using Jenkins. For the people who don't know Jenkins yet, please wait for the time. Once we learn Jenkins, you will be understanding what is that I am speaking about, right? Anni ok roje raavu kada, right? And we have many tools to learn. So for the people who know it, that is a job which I am expecting, and for the people who don't know it, start from here. Make sense, right? Okay, fine. A Minikube is a desktop installation. If you want to basically simulate Kubernetes on your laptop, then you will be installing Minikube. I will not be going that route. That is a very simple route. Everything looks simple there, right? అది Kubernetes నాకు వచ్చు అని చెప్పుకోవడానికి బాగుంటుంది, because you will not have anything there. Minikube you install, it will use Docker of your system and virtual machine of your one virtual interface. In the case of Windows 10, it will use Hyper-V, and then you will be entering the same commands, and everything will be created in your system itself. Right? Good for checking. As I said, Minikube is very good for checking whether your YML files are correct or not. Not worth for anything else. So I am not using that. All right. Okay. Now let us go ahead to our blogs and the last slide of Kubernetes. Come on. Okay. Fine. Let us write our own pods over here. So E drive, A square zone. Sorry. In A square zone, we have Kubernetes zone, manifest. Okay, not manifest. Let me create a new folder. What is this month? This month is still June, right? June 2018. Right? Now let me open Visual Studio Code from here. Okay. Go to extensions and see if there is any extension for Kubernetes. That's fine. For this to be working, you need to have Kubernetes or Minikube installed on your version, on your machine. We don't have it, so it's okay. So let me reload. Okay. I'm creating a new folder, right? And this time I'll be using the stuff to create one simple pod. All right. So I'll call it as sample. And tomorrow I'll be creating one more subfolder where I'll call it as OpenMRS. Right? Fine. What are the file? What are the files which we'll write over here? YAML files. So I'll call this as pod.yam, or you can let me call it as simple hyphen pod.yml. Okay. Good. Right? And then there is a structure. So let us see what is this help offering. API version 1. This is what I want. And kind will tell what is that you have to create. What is your intention of creating? And using these files, we can create pods, you can create services, you can create deployments, and you will be creating one more thing which is called as a replication controller. But as of now, what is my intention? My intention is to create a pod. So pod. Right. Now let us just look back. Metadata will tell you what is your pod all about. What is your pod all about? So let me just go ahead and write. Sorry. Is there anything for metadata? No, will not have it. But there will be one thing which is he has not given it. Fine, that's fine. That should be fine. That is not a extension from a what do you say, from Microsoft or from official partner, right? So you might not have help for everything. So, and in metadata, I want to create something like name. What is the name of your pod which you want to call it? I will call it as simple. Okay. Now you want to tell about specifications. Now you want to tell about specifications. Now let us see what you see. SPEC is always a specification. I said, right, in Kubernetes object there are two important things. One is object spec, the other one is object status. Spec is where you tell Kubernetes API manager what has to be done. Where you tell Kubernetes API manager what has to be done. Now over here in spec, you are trying to tell that I am interested in containers. And I'm speaking about multiple containers, right? I am writing only one container in this pod, but if you want to write multiple containers in this pod, you would be putting one more list item and writing two containers in that pod, right? So over here, what is your first container all about? What is the name of your container? Name of my container is simple, or let me call it as Nginx container, right? This is what I want to call my container as Nginx. Now the next, for that Nginx container, what is the image which you want to use? I want to use an image which is Nginx, right? And then you need to tell about the rest of the details. What are the ports if they have any? So ports. Does Nginx use any ports? Yes or no? Yes. But here we are seeing something called as a container port. Okay, let me come about what are the other kinds of ports which you would be seeing. Container. But remember, spellings are very important, cases are very important. So that's why you have to refer to the existing YAML while writing the stuff, right? And make sense? Not a very difficult thing to write, right? So when you create anything, you will be telling the first till here, it will be same. No matter what are you creating, you will tell what is your API version, and then you will tell what is the stuff which you want to create, which is kind, and what is the metadata, right? And then next comes the spec part. Spec is specification of what you want. The first four lines are not specification. The first four lines are just information about what you are trying to do. And in the specification, you told that I am interested in creating containers in a pod, and I'm interested in having one container in a pod, which is Nginx container. For example, if you want game of life, what will you do? In the place of Nginx, you would write something like Sheikh Khaja Ibrahim /gol colon 1.0 or whatever it is. Whatever is your Docker Hub's image path. You have to give that. Make sense? Is it very difficult? Right? We understand what we are doing here, right? So specification is the important part over here. Rest of the stuff is data. Good. Now what I do is, okay, let me exit out of this. Okay. Uh, okay. I'm using Git to perform this because it is very simple from Visual Studio to do this activity. But you guys, please don't use it until you are good at Git. If you are not, don't even try doing this. I want this code at my master. One thing which I can do there is I can go and copy this file and paste it every time, or I'll create a Git repository or there, Git clone over there, and I'll be just using this stuff. Oh man. Okay. 1 minute. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so close. I'm putting it in Git because you guys also can do the same thing whenever you are trying Kubernetes, whenever you have Kubernetes setup. Right. Now on my master, this is my master, right? What I would do is I'd install Git. Okay, Git clone, and now okay. So I'll get the same folder over here, and if you see my stuff on Windows and on my master are in sync. Right. So whenever you develop any Kubernetes stuff, try to put it in sync so that it is easy for you to work on. Because on Linux machines we don't have Visual Studios, it is Visual Studio codes and all of that, so that we can effectively develop all of the stuff until and unless you have desktop versions of Linux. But we don't have a desktop version of Linux over here. So now cd June 18 ls sample simple pod.yaml. This is what we have created, right? Now is it the same content? Yes. Okay. Now shall I create a file with that? Shall I create a pod with that? How do I do that? Cube ctl, and let basically do a hyphen help. Always the same stuff. Whenever you are working on a new command line, please find out what are the different stuffs that are available with you. Now there are many commands. There are many commands. So for example, the basic commands are create, and then there is a other stuff which is speaking about exposing the stuff. Okay, I'm not doing all of that. And then if you come down and if you look at the stuff which we are interested in is apply. Okay, apply you can be replacing with create also, but if you use apply, even the changes are the same command. You can use something like kubectl create -f sample pod.yaml, and whenever you make some changes, then you can say kubectl apply -f. But rather than using two commands, you can go yourself with using only one command, which is kubectl apply -f. And only in the case when you want to delete, just use the delete. Just use the delete. But actually, for creation we have create, for changes we have apply, and for deletion we have delete command. Okay, but apply can be used for creation also. That's why I'm using the apply command itself. I'm not using create. Right. So let me use this cube ctl. Okay, apply, and then you have to give -f, and then the path of your YAML file. My path is over here itself, simple pod.yaml. Now what does it say? It says pod has been created. Now cube ctl. Okay, get what should I write? What is the kind which I have created now? Pod. So get, are you seeing simple pod? Yes. If I want to get more information, I'll be using -o. So it is telling that your pod has an IP address of 10.44.0.3, and it is created on a machine which is our node actually, which is 203. Now things are looking good. Yes, but how do I access it? How do I access it? I don't have a point. I can't go to 10.44.0.0.3. Now let me try this. So on this machine, okay, let me try to use the 80 port. So what is this second machine? Node 1. What is the public IP address of this machine? So let me copy this http:// working? No, because in our spec I have not said anything about exposing. In my spec I have just said what the pod has to run, but I have not spoken about anything with respect to exposing this pod or exposing whatever this pod is creating. So can I do anything? Yes. The answer for that is node port. The answer for that is node port. So node port Kubernetes example. I don't want to get into complicated topics, but I wanted to look very simple. Let me see. Okay. Let me not do all of that nonsense. Let me do it from here itself. Let me say ports hyphen node port colon. Let us see what will happen with this. So I've done this change where? In my Windows machine. So I want to make it available on that machine. So added node port. I want you to get used to this kind of workflow because every change which you done on your pod.yaml is version. Every change. And whenever you want to go back to any specific version, that is possible. All right. So if you don't know Git, right, or if you have not known Git till now, what you can do is at least put it in Google Drive. Upload. And in Google Drive, you can right click on a file and say enable versions. So every upload which you do on your file will have some sort of a version. Once you get used to this kind of a workflow, then it is very easy for us to learn version control systems. Because నేను చేసిన ప్రతి చేంజ్ నాకు కావాలి. Before this, I didn't have node port. If I want, I should be able to go to that position. Right? If this is working, wonderful. Right? If it is not working, so every change which I made to this file, I want to keep a track of all of that. So, right? Now it is very simple because see what I'll do. If I'm using Git, I'll get this. What are the top three stuffs? Added node port. I've done it just now. And before then, commit changes just now. And if you are seeing times, you have times over here. With timestamps, it will tell you what you have done and when you have done it. So we need this kind of a history in the enterprise world. So that's why I'm just taking it over here, even though it is not an important topic to discuss right now. Okay. Every change which you do in your DevOps, whatever stuff which you do, try to put it in some sort of a version control system. Right. Now, let me go to my master. And then I want to get the latest version. I do this. And then let us see what happens. kubectl apply -f. What does it say? There is unknown field called as node port. So node port, how can it become an unknown field? There is something called as, so you have written something called as container port. That is fine. But he has said that if you are using node ports, I don't know what it is. So how can Kubernetes be that much rude to me? All right. Remember, Kubernetes objects are defined in API versions. Sometimes whenever you are using certain stuff, it is that in the API version which you have specified, the definition of node port might not be available. So whenever you get these kind of errors, the things that you have to check is my API version supporting this? Is my API version supporting this? Sometimes your API version might not support this, even though if it is the right syntax. And the next thing that might happen is you might have used the wrong stuff. You might have used the wrong stuff. Always remember, because if I go back and show some of the stuffs which are over here, let me go over here. Okay. So let me go to the March pods. Okay. Not this. Let me go with replica sets or anything. Are you seeing some versions changing? because there is some kind called as replica set, and it is not present in v1. It is not present in v1. This is a headache in Kubernetes, and you have to live with this. Sometimes whatever you try to do might not be supported directly. Sometimes whatever you try to do might not be supported directly. Now let us look at some other examples. Okay, service is supported in v1. Let us go to deployments. Again the stuff changes. Again the stuff changes. So whenever you try to work on any other thing or anything, in that case you have to always be very specific about your versions. And this was a failure. This was a failure because your Kubernetes API doesn't know anything about node port. Doesn't know anything about your node port. So whenever you are writing YAMLs, please be very careful that you cannot write anything in any version. You have to be very specific of what I have to use in which version, and that knowledge you have to keep it with yourself. I mean, you have to gain that knowledge. All right, so how do I do that? How do I do that? How do I gain all of that? The only answer to that is Google. Right, because you can't, basically there is no table as such which says that in version 1 we have these things, in version 2 you have these things. No. So based out of your errors you have to find out what is that is going wrong. Right, so it says that unknown field called as, and if you see that he is telling you some API references. Right, so let us do this. Expose, okay, container port in, you would have multiple stuffs. There are multiple different ways of really doing this. Okay, I'm interested in YAMLs. Service is fine. Okay, but there is, here he is telling that you have to use something called as ingress. Right, so there is no one such way as such to really basically find out what it is. But I'm interested in pod, I'm not interested in this stuff. If it is service, very simple. Again they are going with us with respect to service. Now see, there is one more command which is happening at the bottom. Kubernetes expose service, and then there is something called as target port over there. Target port over there. Right, now let us see if I can use a similar command for that. All right, so what I do is vi simple pod.yaml, and let me try to use something called as oh, target. Okay, now kubectl apply -f. Again the same thing. I'm not getting any help over here, so let me do one more thing. So vi simple pod.yaml, and then I'm not interested in this, so I'm deleting this line. Okay, so I'll apply this again. So it says nothing is unchanged, so there is no need for you to worry, everything is going good. Now let me use this kube ctl expose pod hyphen. Okay, so he's just trying to tell kubectl expose, and basically you can give the file name or whatever type it is and the name of that. Okay, and then port, protocol, target port number. All right, now let us look at this, and if I have to basically write something like this for pod, what will be my commands looking like? Can you just help me out? Not this, let me close this, let me minimize this, let me go it over to the top. So what should my command look like? Kubectl expose pod, and name of my pod is simple pod. Okay, And what is the port? Pod's port is 80. And now target port is equals to, oh, port equals to. Be very specific about the command lines. I think otherwise you'll unnecessarily be getting into mess, right? So, and then I'll call it as 8080. Okay, and then you have to give name for this exposure. So name I'll call it as Nginx. Making sense, right? Let us see what happens. What it says: could not retrieve via selector pods. There are no pod. No, the pod has no labels and cannot be exposed. So what is the first step which we do before we do all of this? We have to create labels. Remember yesterday while we are discussing about services, I said that labels are very important, and for Kubernetes to do anything, it needs labels. So now you don't have labels. And by the way, the activity which I am trying to do, you will never try to do in your real case scenarios, because in real time scenarios, we will never work with single pods. You will never work with single pods. The next step which you have to suppose to do is, let us try to find something else. This way is not going good. Okay, so always exposure to the external world happens via service. Even though you have one pod, you will try to create a service for it, because exposing services is made easy by Kubernetes. Is made easy by Kubernetes. And in Kubernetes, whenever you are exposing services, then your cloud providers also will help you, right? For example, I go to the Google Cloud and I create the service, and I can then it is very easy for me to expose this service using the Google load balancer. I am using Azure, and if I want to expose the service, then basically it is very easy for me to expose it via Azure load balancer. So any exposures we do via services. Is it not possible? It is possible. For the stuff to be possible over here, you need to do two more changes. One is, there is something called as node port, which has to deal with change in API version. The other stuff is, basically you can use something called as expose, but for this you need to have labels. But exposing pods directly to an external IP is not often a good practice. Is not often a good practice. But we still have, our problem is not solved. I have Nginx created, or Nginx container or Nginx pod created, which is going good. It is working just because Kubernetes is showing me. I am unable to access it. As of now, that is my statement. Let us see how do I resolve this. So let me just remove this. Kubernetes kubectl delete -f simple pod.yaml. Right? Good. Now the stuff which I want to do over here is, how many pods have I created? One. So do you think that is the best way to go? What will happen if this pod dies? What will happen if that node is being basically removed? Is your state maintained? No. So for that reason, we will be creating pods, and we will also be telling our API manager, how many pods do you want? How many pods do you want? Shall we do that? Right? We have spoken about one pod. Now I'm speaking about the same thing, but I'm speaking about multiple pods. I'm speaking about multiple pods. And this is achieved by something called as replica set. This is achieved by something called as replica set. Now your kind suddenly becomes replica set. So in replica set or replication controller, what we try to do is, we try to create multiple versions of the same thing, multiple versions of the pod, right? I will go to the service and then I'll expose the pod. Till that I'm not exposing anything, right? So for that, Google for node port and see how to add node port to your pod.yaml. Okay. So for the people who don't try, I'm not interested. And for the people who try and are unable to do, you can always speak with me. You can either write to me. There is a blog there. There are issues blog there. If you have anything to ask, you can ask it over there. But I'm not interested in the people who don't try and daily come in the morning just listening and going. That doesn't make any help. Pod lo node port add cheyochu. Google చేయండి. ఏం చేంజ్ చేస్తే వర్క్ చేసిందో నాకు చెప్పండి. I've given you the hint. In the pod.yaml, you can add node port. Okay. What has to be changed for that to be worked. For example, when I tried for the first time, I was getting an error, right? And I said that the error is twofold. One is you are using it at a wrong place. The other one is your API version is not matching. Find out what is the reason for that. And now second one, I've shown you the other way of expose, but this way tells you to create labels. Without labels, I can't expose. Right? Anyway, labels will be creating in the classroom, and I want you to try out that approach also. So two approaches you will be able to expose your pods to the container. Now I am not going to speak about single pods. I want to speak about multiple Nginx pods, because that is why we go to Kubernetes. If it was running about one Nginx stuff, why do I need to install Kubernetes at all? Like I would go to the Docker. I would basically say Docker run Nginx -p 8080:80. Things are very simple there, right? So how do I go with multiple stuffs? And the answer for that is, where is my stuff over here? Okay, we'll be creating something called as replication controller. We will go ahead and create one more thing called as replica set, but for that replica set, this is the first basic stuff. Now see what he's trying to tell. I'm trying to create a kind which is called as replication controller, and then he's giving metadata. Do you remember that I said that the first 4 lines are always the same? Is that the same thing happening here? Okay, and then we have spec, and in the spec we are just trying to tell what is that you want in replication controller. He's telling that I want 10 replicas. He's telling that I want 10 replicas, and then there is something called as selector. I'll come back to what that is, but let me tell this point. So I'll go over here. Where is a simple pod? And now I'll call it as simple pod replication.yml. First is API version v1, kind, match spellings, otherwise you will unnecessarily get into trouble. Replication controller, and then we would have metadata, and I'm giving 2 spaces, and I'm writing simple RC. Simple RC is my replication controller's name, and then I'm supposed to write about spec. And whenever you are writing spec for something, initially you will write spec for your kind. You will write spec for your kind. And what is my kind over here? Replication controller. In replication controller, you have to provide a value which says about how many replications do you want. How many replications do you want? Let me go over here, and then there is a replication count which is 10, but I will not go that far. I'll basically say replicas, all right, and I would say 2. So whether it is 2 or 200, you have to just change this value, all right? And now I'll not come to selector right now. I'll not use selector. I'll come back to what that selector means after some point. But let me create something called as template. So in this replication controller, what is that you are supposed to have? Multiple pods, and this template is all about that. ఈ template లో మీరు pod గురించి రాస్తారు. In this template you write information about your pod. And what is the pod which I want to create? I want to create an Nginx pod, right? So now you look at this information. In template, do you have metadata for pods? For pods, do you have labels? For pods, do you have containers? And if you look at this file suddenly looks like pod.yaml file. Template lo content అని మీరు చూస్తే గనక. So let me choose it. Let me show you in a, what do you say, Kubernetes zone. Not this manifest. Sorry, I'm going again and again to the same stuff. This is in actually the format which we are interested in. In template, we have metadata, and in metadata I have written something new which is called as labels. So where do you put your labels now? In metadata. So remember, while I was creating the pod for the first time, I have not used labels, but if you want, you can use it. If you want, you can use it. I have used just something called as name, and name of my pod was simple pod. But see what I'm doing over here. I'm basically saying that I have 2 labels to this. One is called as app, the other one is called as version. The value of app is nginx and the value of version is, or whatever version which you want, right? And then specification of your pod. In pod I'll have a container, and container will have some name, okay, and then it will have some image and it will have some ports. Is it not the same thing what we have done? The only thing that is changing in this template is I have labels now, which I didn't add earlier. ఓకే, ఇందాక pod.yaml కి ఇప్పుడు pod.yaml కి డిఫరెన్స్ ఏంటంటే దీనికి లేబుల్స్ ఉన్నాయి, ఇప్పుడు లేవు. ఓకే, and there we were speaking about a kind which was called as pod, so our specification will directly contain about pod. Now I am telling about a kind which is called as replication controller. So my specification will start with replication controller, and in that there will be a template, and that template will tell what is about pod. So similarly, whenever you are writing a kind which is service, so what will your spec consist of? First, service. That's it. That's the whole point. Right. Now, shamelessly, let me copy all of this. Okay. Okay, so if you want, you can change the name of this. So we were using that simple pod notations, right? So I'll basically change to that. So my pod has two labels. Every pod of mine will have two labels. One is this, the other one is version. Let me use 1.0. Let me use 1.0. Now I'm telling that I want two replicas, right? That will still not solve the problem. Okay, two replicas are good, but what is your selector? How do you select it? Okay, my select is using a label. My select is using a label. Here you are telling I want two replicas. Good, two replicas of a template, fine. Okay, then but how do you select them? So for this stuff we write something called as selector, and in selector you would tell, okay, in selector you would tell what is your labels, what are your labels. So I would tell, okay, my app is nginx, and if I want I can tell one more label, but as of now I'm not interested in that, right? So now do we know how do I create a label for a pod? So if I have to go to this and add labels, how will it sound like? Go over here and say labels, right? And in the labels give whatever label that makes sense to you. So env test environment, right? And then app, whatever that makes sense to you, whatever that makes sense to you, you can add it over here. So this is how you add labels to your pod. And remember, the importance of the labels increases as we speak about services and deployments, and it starts from replication controller, but the major importance of the labels is whenever you are speaking with services, right? Okay, good. So now let me remove this. We don't need this. Fine. Is it looking good? Shall we try this? Yes, but if your cluster is more, you can make that replicas to as much number as you want. I'm just put two for simplicity, right? Now let me add these changes. Added rc, push, okay, fine. Okay, fine. Now cat simple. Oh, I've written just as, what was my file's name? Okay, cat simple pod hyphen replication.yaml. So shall we create this? Okay, so what will be the command? Kubectl apply minus f, and then simple pod. So simple pod replication. Oh man, what is that I've missed? Version handled as replication controller dot spec. Always a mess. Let me just do one thing. Version v1 ne kada. Okay. Well, I'll do one thing. These things change, man. I can't help it. So replication controller Kubernetes YML. I should have run this yesterday. I have not done that. V1 good. Did I use the similar stuff? Inte kada మనం వాడింది. Yeah. Can you cross check and see if there is anything which I messed up? That should work, man. Find replication controller metadata spec template. Name should be. You mean to say here? I don't think that is the name of your container. That is not really the name of the stuff. It is not complaining about the name. If you see, it is telling about, okay, in version v1 I cannot find anything called as replication one controller one. That's the problem, right? Okay. Mm, mm. What is this stuff? Bad request when creating simple pod replication controller cannot be handled as replication, but found one error in 10 byte of version 1 spec. Let me try this. Okay, let me change in the next machine directly. So vi simple pod. It should not be the case, but I'm just suspecting that somehow it is converting this label to some sort of a different data type. Let me try. Let me see. These, man, yeah. So basically 1.0, right? 1.0 is a number data type, and labels are supposed to be strings. So just put that in double quotes. Yeah, silly problem, but that's how it is. Yeah. What is during that conversion, what is happening is, for label it is trying to convert that into a JSON, and suddenly it is a string and it tries to convert it to a number. So that's why you are getting this error. So now fine, good that these things happen in the class, otherwise you'll never know that there is some error like this. Okay, now get, what is that we have created? Replication controller. So what is that you are seeing now? Yeah, you asked for a state which is 2, and I've given you a state which is 2. Now let me do this. Kubectl get pods. All right, and now kubectl get pods minus o. So both of them running on same machine or a different machine? Because we have one node, obviously they will run there. But if you have more than one node, they would have distributed basically on 2 nodes, right? Now let me do this. Let me go back to my stuff. over here in the documentation, and in the last there is something called as delete something called as pod slash hello pod. Let me see if I can delete something. Okay, so yeah, kubectl delete pods slash, and let me use something. Let us see what will happen. Okay, so what does it say? There is no need to specify, there is no need to specify a resource type. Okay, oh, I copied a hell lot of stuff. What has happened? Pod is deleted. Let us see what will happen now. Kubectl get, what is it saying? Oh, is it? So let us see. Kubectl get, is it launching one more? Yes. లేదని పేరు గుర్తెట్టుకోండి దీన్ని. Okay, so kubectl delete pods rc zmp x deleted. Are you seeing one is terminating and suddenly replication controller is bringing one more up? This will not happen when you create pods. kubectl create -f అని లేదంటే apply -f అని pod ఇచ్చారనుకోండి, pod will not have the state functionality. But here we said I want always two replication controllers. Even though I am deleting pods manually, Kubernetes is maintaining the state by just bringing up one more pod. Does it make sense? Right now, since I have one node, everything is going in basically one machine. But if I had another node, the pod would have been created on a different machine. So any failure that are happening on your pod will not impact your system. Is it evident with this? Yes, you delete it manually, you shut down the machine, right? As of now, shutting down the machine will not basically help us because we have one node. But if you have two nodes, suddenly the pods will move, or new pods will be created on a different machine. Is now replication controller better than pod? Yes. If you want one, just say one. Replica size one. Use the replication controller, because if that pod dies by any chance, it will be the automatically the other pod will be created. But when you use only pod.yaml, there is no state there. You are just telling that I want one pod. You are not telling about one pod, you are just telling that I want this pod. That's it. But when you go to the replication controller, you are telling about a number. And whenever you are load balancing from your API manager, every time that number changes. Every time that number changes. Now let us do one more thing. So I'll go over here, vi simple pod, and I would say that I am not interested with 2, but rather I want 3. I've changed the number. Now kubectl, okay, let me write it again. Kubectl apply -f, okay, simple pod, what is it saying? Configured. Now kubectl get, so what is the desired state? Current how many have? Out of which 2 are ready. Let me try to do this again. Okay, so kubectl get, okay, so it is trying to bring the third one up. There is some error state. After that, it will try to bring one more up. It will try to kill, and then it will have a by default the timeout of 40 seconds. It will wait for 40 seconds for the pod to be up. If that is not happening, it would basically bring up one more pod. Is it happening all on the behalf of a simple command called as replication controller? Yes. So tomorrow, whenever we are creating open MRS, is it not a safe idea to do this? You specify the number of how many do you want, and whenever you want, anyway you can change. You have to just change your YAML, and then you have to apply it. Okay, so once you integrate this with Kubernetes services, then you can automatically scale this also. automatically scale this one number also, right? Is it making sense? Right? Okay. Now, okay, get. So let me commit it from here. Get add dot get commit minus m corrected replication controller. Okay, that's the whole point why I don't use it here. Config user dot email. Oh man, it will take unnecessarily. Fine. Okay, so get. Okay, get all. Okay, fine. So now I've made changes on my Linux machine, and let us see what would happen. What are the changes which I would have over here? I'm unnecessarily getting into Git, right? But unfortunately, I want this to be very clear. So okay, fine. So version is in double quotes. That is a fix which I have done on the Linux machine. Now if you see, it is available over here. Fine. So replicas are 3 as per what I have basically mentioned the current state right there. Okay. So I am creating multiple pods now. I'm able to create multiple pods. Now, if you want to create 10 pods, will you be able to create it? The only thing which you have to do is change the number over there, right? Instead of using the Nginx, you might be using Game of Life or whatever port which you want, right? Now, the other thing which I want is all of these pods will have unique IP addresses, right? Yes, every pod will have IP address. Now, if you want to access, or if some application or some pod in a container wants to access the other pod, right? They have to go by IP addresses. And we have seen pods can be killed, pods can be deleted, and something can happen to the pods. So giving an IP address of a pod is not very stable or not a very sensible idea. So what was the solution for that? So we have learned about something called as service. What will service do? Service will create something like a load balancer in front of it, and load balancer will, so the service will every time get an IP address, and whenever you want to access these stuff, we will always be using basically the same stuff. So shall I create a service for this? Yeah, for the replication controller. So without looking much, you might have known the pattern by now. So I'll write simple pod service.yml. What will be the first one? Oh, is it 842 already? Man, I'm sorry for that. Okay. So let us continue in the tomorrow's class. Okay. I thought it is still 742 or something like that. Okay. Okay. Right. So we'll continue the services and deployment. Jaran చెప్పండి 8:30 అయితే ఎందుకంటే I have enough syllabus in cloud also. All right. I'm extremely sorry guys. ఎవరో ఒకళ్ళు మణిక where is మణికంట? Yeah, at least remind me when I'm going late. This will happen only in Docker. Don't think in other context, because we have stuff to be discussing. But yeah, let us do it tomorrow. Fine. I'm sorry for the delay, and I'll take questions probably in the next class. I'll start from your questions, right? And on Monday, and if the syllabus is not completed, we might have the class of Docker on Sunday also, right? So because the most important thing is you should be able to do all of this on your own, right? And you can start with creating your own Docker file for OpenMRS application. If you have it, wonderful. If you don't have it, try to create one. So it is much like what we have done for Pet Clinic. Take Tomcat from Tomcat :8, and then you have to copy one var file. That's it. Nothing more than that in that image, right? Have that image ready in your repository and build that and push it in your repository. And then let us see how to basically get it done. Okay. So let me speak. I'll take these questions tomorrow. I don't think I have time for this. Yeah. Good to change time, whenever, because sometimes whenever you are trying, right, you will not know time. Yeah. Sorry guys, sorry for the delay, and we'll meet tomorrow to continue the discussion on this.